Generally speaking, we know what we're doing. We like to pretend.
Absolutely. But we've been at it for a little over 6 months now, and it's been good, Monsignor. You know, we are trying certainly not to take ourselves too seriously by any means, but have meaningful conversations, and we've gotten some nice feedback from strangers even too, which has been good, and want to keep this going. So whatever the Holy Spirit wants, we're here for it. So what do you think of the garage?
Very nice. Very well kept.
Thank you. You have to compliment it. I worked very hard on it.
No, it's very well kept.
I was in
Organized.
here straightening up right before you got here. Tess said, "What are you doing?" I was like, "I'm not going to let Monsignor walk in here and my garage be an absolute trash pit." So
normally we say 2 dudes in a garage, but tonight 3 fathers in the garage, folks. Yes, indeed. Perfect. We were saying earlier, folks, before we started, we could not have Monsignor Farmer here during the summer. That would have just been cruel and unusual punishment. So now that it's a nice crisp 57 outside, I think, something like that, a perfect time to start. So we are here with Monsignor Michael Farmer, everybody, our pastor here at St. Michael the Archangel Parish in Auburn, Alabama. This has been an episode Ryan and I, of course, have spotted from the beginning and have been very excited to have and to talk with you, Monsignor. So thank you for your time very, very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Right off the bat, how are you, sir? How are you doing?
Well, busy, but doing well.
I don't think there's probably much time where you would say you weren't busy. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yes, sir.
It's a good parish and lots going on and stuff. So keep busy most days.
Absolutely. How would you say God is working in your life right now?
I think God's working very well in my life. I think for the past, probably the whole time I've been here as pastor at St. Michael's, it's been very good. There's been some trying days like anything, but overall, just very fulfilling and busy, and in most days ready to go to bed, but also too knowing things have been accomplished. And so that's very rewarding.
What time do you hit the hay most nights?
I'm in bed probably by 10:30, I would say. Sometimes a little later than that.
Okay.
that makes me exhausted just thinking about it. I'm not going to lie to you. If I'm up past 9, I'm already upset. And then my son wakes up in the middle of the night and it throws me for another loop. Monsignor, you've worn a lot of hats, and we're going to dive into some of that throughout this episode. Sure. Your story is truly, I can't wait to learn more about it, because really we've had brief conversations about where the Lord has taken you in your life. And our listeners are very interested in that as well. But just as a kind of fun question, for you've been in Auburn, you've been in Rome, you've been in Mobile, you've had different roles. When someone asks you what you do, what would your answer be?
My answer would be just what the vocation is, that I'm a priest of Jesus Christ. And so as a priest of Jesus Christ, the primary thing is I'm a man of prayer, but also too of celebrating the sacraments and encountering the rest of humanity with the life and teachings of Jesus Christ in the sacramental life. That would be what I say I would do, regardless of if I'm doing pastor, if I'm doing on the faculty of a seminary, or if I'm working in the chancery of the archdiocese.
Very good. So, Alex, we've done this with other guests. We need to tiptoe a little carefully with this one. First impressions of Monsignor Michael Farmer. What was Alex's first impression?
All right, he's putting me on the spot, Monsignor. Okay. Well, it was, for me personally, Lucy and I were married in April of 2018. And then it was announced very shortly after that you and Monsignor Skinecki were going to be switching places. I had never laid eyes on you before. So the first time I laid eyes on you, I said, okay, well, there he is. This is him. Okay, I was going to touch on this later, but I'll just touch on it now. Why not? Monsignor, us among close friends, the ex-men, I would say, Ryan and I are a group who all know, Avery and Chase and Justin and such not. We have a nickname for you. We call you a savage. I don't know if you've heard that before, and that's a good word. Savage.
Michael Savage.
Michael Savage Farmer. And that is because we appreciate so much your candor and the way you speak to our parish in your sermons and during Holy Mass every week. We really appreciate the challenges and the truth and also how you put yourself in our shoes so often. You're a human being, a sinner, just like we all are. We thoroughly enjoy the sense of humor and the wit and the sarcasm, as you so lovingly put it. But I think my first impression very quickly was a little taste of that. And I appreciated that. And, I certainly nothing negative. I was looking forward to having you here. And certainly when my wife and I really got involved in the parish, it's been you and Father Plessala, and now you and Father Mills, and it's been wonderful. Yes, sir.
Wonderful.
I would go along those lines as well. Definitely the savage part was kind of so I was away from the church. I was baptized cradle Catholic, grew up in Catholic school, and then coming back into the church, I think you were the perfect pastor at the time that I needed, because it was just no nonsense. And so I really got a kick out of just like Alex said, your candor and your truth and your relatability. I've seen Monsignor, I've seen you give homilies just telling the entire congregation, like, yeah, this is what I'm struggling with. And you're probably feeling some sort of way, something similar. And you've always been very relatable. And I really, really appreciate that. But yeah, I do enjoy the occasional Monsignor Savage Farmer up on the altar saying, hey, you need to be in church every Sunday. Like, call people out when they need a little kick in the rear. And we can, we can count on you for that little kick in the rear every now and then. So that was my first impression, was like, this guy just calls it how he sees it.
Well, and we're in a place of, Auburn and everything. We're in a place of excellence, I think, in a lot of ways. And I think, well, again, the parish, I mean, we have people from teachers to medical professionals, running companies and everything else. And so when you're talking about excellence in the workplace, then there should be excellence, I would hope, in our faith life as well, which I think we need more than ever right now. That's one of my interest and I think observations, is that we don't have time to play around with it. Mm-hmm. And so it's sort of a good time to just say, okay, let's get serious but life-giving with our faith life as well. And that goes for me too, for that. So
I'm sure. As a priest, Monsignor, let me ask you this first. Monsignor, do you prefer, out of curiosity, being called Monsignor or Father? Do you have a preference?
It does not matter. I've answered to both. And I mean, you would always say Father is the best thing. I mean, my time in Mobile, I was, quote, made a Monsignor in 2005. And so it's funny because people that are from the Mobile area, it was always Monsignor up here. It's been Monsignor Father and everything. The only thing I have is I don't like to be called Father Michael, Father Mike, Mikey, or just Farmer or Monsignor Farmers.
I can't even imagine doing that. It sounds so terrible, to be honest.
I'm going to put Chase up to the challenge. I'm going to let Chase tackle that one. For those of us listening who may not understand, because I'm familiar with the title Monsignor from my high school days. Can you just give a quick distinction? What is the distinction?
Monsignor is a honorary title that is given to a priest by the Holy Father, usually due to the recommendation of the local bishop. And so it's an honorary title. It follows you wherever you go, but it is still honorary in that sense. And it's usually given for a variety of reasons, from everything from a senior priest that's been, faithful in carrying out things, and then in old age gets this title. There is a tradition where those who work like I did, like in the diocesan structure, or like, and I was chancellor and vicar general, and then I was also the rector of the cathedral. So a lot of times those positions are made monsignors just because of the position itself. Judicial vicar, those who work in our tribunal and things.
Mm-hmm.
So I was made a Monsignor under Pope Benedict XVI, and but it was obviously my name was submitted for that by Archbishop at the time, Archbishop Lipscomb, who did that. So
Yes, sir. What I was going to ask you before, Monsignor, is we mentioned, your truth, your candor, the way you speak to us so frankly. Were you always like that when you were first ordained, or is that something you've got more comfortable with over time within your priesthood and that fatherly role? Or is it more of a, like you said, in Auburn, that demand of excellence, and you're kind of more reading the crowd, would you say?
I think, for as personality-wise, I've always somewhat been a shy person in one sense. So I think sort of the sarcasm or just the directness is sort of the way, maybe I could do a psychological study, I guess, but you could say maybe that's the way I engage initially and things. So, but my mother would say probably that I've always sort of been a smart aleck, and in a good way, sort of just to tell you, particularly if I get to know you. So I think with the parish, I'm comfortable with the parish to do that. But I find myself that I've always, after a little while, will just go ahead and speak my piece, and
Yes, sir.
with charity and everything, but just, okay.
Yes, sir. And you are from Prattville, Alabama,
Prattville,
correct? Yes, sir.
Alabama, yeah.
So what kind of kid were you?
I was like I said, shy.
Yes, sir.
We came from matter of fact, my mom, dad, the family is from that area,
Okay.
Catawba County. My mom and dad, matter of fact, on All Saints Day, were married 67 years.
Fantastic.
My mother turned 85. My father's 87. And so they grew up in that entire area. So I grew up in Prattville, kindergarten through 12th grade. And so I was one of two children, this baby of the family. And my brother was the athlete. I was the more bookworm, I guess. And sort of like music, I was in band, piano, and all that. So,
yes, sir.
But in family, I probably wasn't shy. Matter of fact, they said I talked too much and everything. So, but in a greater, around a lot of people and at things, I could be very quiet. And
sure. How was your family's faith life? Where was that growing up for you?
So I grew up, in my father's side of the family were basically probably Southern Baptist. I would know, but my grandmother, farmer, was very much a devout Southern Baptist. And so he was brought up in sort of that backdrop. My mom was Methodist. And so my brother and I were brought up, in a sense, Methodist, because my mother practiced, going to the Methodist church. Strangely, though, was not baptized. Methodists usually sometimes baptize their infants or children. But we were not, but brought up in that Methodist backdrop. And then typical, I think, in the Deep South, even to this day, you're sort of brought up in the summertime going to vacation Bible schools with different, all denominations and everything. So I was brought up that way up until around junior high school. And my mother stopped going to the Methodist church. We stopped going, my brother and I, who's my brother's 3 years older than I am. And so it was in high school with friends. Again, people always inviting you to their churches and so forth. But my own interest in saying, okay, I want to go back. But for me, it was more of probably initially history and just reading. That was sort of a thing of, well, the Catholics seem to be one of the oldest churches. And strangely too, where my grandmother lived and where my mother grew up in Marbury, Alabama, there was a cloistered community of Dominican nuns. And so growing up, we always saw that, and no one could really answer everything because they were not Catholic for us around the town. and they were just Catholic nuns and things like that. So there was sort of a mystery there, and then probably also in early high school going up there, and that's where I went to at that monastery actually was where I went to my first Catholic mass, and there was just a simple beauty to it, and started questioning and looking into it.
What did that questioning and looking into kind of like, you said you were very book smart, and
Yeah.
were you up in the library? Were you?
Yeah, well, some of it was like I do remember like at the public library in Prattville getting some books on Catholicism just to see what it was about. And very funny because the library really didn't have, and this would have been in the 1981 probably, or 82, because I became Catholic senior year in 1984. So the books were not necessarily contemporary books. They would have been books from the mid 60s, even before that. So a lot of the pictures and descriptions, those things had changed somewhat, I guess, with Vatican II. And but then the church in Marbury, it was a very, still is a very like traditional order of cloistered nuns. And so it, for me, was the beauty of the liturgy, I guess, as I would learn. It was the liturgy, that there was a way of doing things. And then like even that first mass, and we're talking about a basic, it was a simple, it still is a simple chapel, wood frame building type, center block, but just very clean. They have adoration, so there's still always a smell of incense in there. And then I guess going to my first mass there, being only one of like 5 lay people, and then the nuns being behind the grill, and then the priest at the altar. For me, it was just very peaceful. And what seemed to be going on, there seemed to be something real there beyond what you were seeing. I don't think it was necessarily a mystical experience, but it was something like that. Just sort of like I felt a sense of peace to the point I want to learn more about this and what's going on here. So
you said you converted your senior year, so it does seem like that ball kind of started rolling pretty fast.
yeah. So this would have been first time going to the mass. Probably I was in 10th grade. 11th grade started. Well, after that, 11th grade, I really would go off and on to like the Catholic church there in Prattville, St. Joseph's, which actually was right across the street from our neighborhood. And so then, but even that led to basically the Sunday after that first mass, I lied to my parents and said I was going to the library, and it was just basically to go over there to the Catholic church, rang the doorbell of the rectory. Father Patrick Marr, who was a native of Ireland, came to the door. I had a few questions. He answered, we talked. And then that would mean I would occasionally stop by to see him, occasionally going to, mass there at St. Joseph, and then sort of making the decision by the end of my junior year that I was going to become Catholic. And so I waited. Well, actually, Father Marr was going home to Ireland, and for some of the summer, and he said, why don't we get started back in the fall? We didn't have like OCIA or RCIA there. So it was private instructions with ENI September through up to Easter, and just going to mass. And then there was a guy at Prattville High School. Prattville's grown a lot, just like Auburn has. But at that time, what was funny was the Catholic population in Prattville was not really many natives. They were either connected to Maxwell Air Force Base, or they were working for the federal government or state government there in the Montgomery area, or they had retired from the military. And so, that was always a joke. I remember my father saying, yeah, the Catholics, the Yankees, and so, that was a sort of always funny in one sense, but it was actually true at that time. Now, I think at St. Joseph, you would find people that have grown up there in the parish. Everyone knows Father Booton and stuff of our day. He is from Prattville. Matter of fact, I'm one of 3 priests that have come from that parish, particularly over the past 20 years or more. from that have become Catholic priest.
Praise God.
When you were going through that process, and we can kind of move on if we need to, but when you were going through that process and really deciding, okay, this is where, what was there one thing that you were most hung up on?
For me, there was no really, I have to say, in all honesty, everything made very practical sense to me. And there were certain things that I thought I would get hung up on. For me, immediately was very much the reality of the church's belief about what the Eucharist was. And then basically Father Marr, God bless him, he's now deceased, but he was very good, very practical in his instructions just about, and I even do this to this day. I remember him talking about the Eucharist. He says, well, the Lord says here, and it's usually the passage from John, but the other gospel accounts, that he wanted us to have this. And he says, now we have, and he went through the whole transubstantiation and the theology of the Eucharist. But he said, bottom line is, Jesus wants it, and if he's Lord and Savior and he rose from the dead, and I firmly believe bread and wine with his words, if he says he wants it to be done, it will be done. And so we have to be faithful to him. And that was sort of the way I just took it. And, then, of course, even then, studying some of the basic theology about it and liturgy. And even as I got into seminary, it was just, okay, yeah, this, you have a deeper understanding of it. But, and for me, I think that first Mass that I went to, that's what was there.
Yes, sir.
The presence of Jesus Christ in a way that you knew but couldn't explain and just knew.
Yes, sir.
And then just starting to go into church. I remember Father Marr was very good about, because he kept asking, is it Mary? Is it the Eucharist? Any hang-ups? There was not, except that he said, I just think it would be good for you to occasionally, by then, had a car. I was a senior, so drive. He said, stop in and just, as he would say, sit with the Lord. And I would start doing that during the weekday. Sometimes just stop in once a week, nothing big, 15 minutes. And it was sort of odd, but you knew he was there. And so, so that was, and the Mary thing did not, the devotion to Our Lady and to the saints made sense to me as well. I mean, I think maybe, what I had heard sometimes in my life growing up in Prattville was, and then, why, I remember as a kid, that was one of the big things about the Catholic Church. Why do they keep that nativity set out after Christmas Day? And why they always have statues of Mary? What's this all about? And you would hear, oh, they worship her, or she replaces Jesus. But then you learn what about true devotion to Mary is. She's always leading you to her son, and she's like a good mother. So I never had really big issues with any of what a lot of people would consider the major theological points, which I find interesting in our present OCIA classes. Since I've been here at St. Michael's, I'm fascinated that most of our participants don't have major issues about the Eucharist. Matter of fact, a lot of them are looking for that. And maybe some with the Mary, and purgatory has to be explained a little bit more.
Sure.
But the central issues, most of our folks today with technology and everything have pretty much investigated a lot of it even before coming to the class. So
By far, just in Ryan and I's casual conversations with people, we have noticed that the Eucharist is what really draws people in more than anything by far. Yes, sir. I think about the quote from Bishop Fulton Sheen, 99% of people, only 1% of people really hate the Catholic Church. The other 99% just hate what they think the Catholic Church believes. Yes, sir, absolutely. So I really appreciate your words there, Monsignor. Absolutely. Going forward in the future a little bit, when you were discerning the priesthood, did you always know you wanted to be a diocesan priest, or did you think about any orders at all?
I thought about, after I got into what I guess seminary, you sort of play around with, okay, are you being attracted to diocesan priesthood, or a religious order priesthood. So I had done my formation, that is in seminary, um, down at St. Joseph Seminary College in Covington, Louisiana, which was Benedictine run. And I was there for 2 years. And I always liked the Benedictines. I really liked that, again, order and sort of community life and things. So I think I thought briefly, matter of fact, looked into why I was still, studying for the Archdiocese of Mobile, just never really in a tangible, formal way. Like I never filled out an application or anything, but I looked into it and I just thought, no, this is not for me. And then there at times you get these romantic ideas about Benedictines. And then when I was in Rome, I did have Jesuit profs and all, and I've always had admiration for all the religious communities, and but particularly like the Benedictines probably, but at the same time, never really an attraction. I think the diocesan priesthood's always good because you can sort of blend all of that.
Yes, sir.
To a certain point. And we always jokingly say, which is true, there's no one spirituality for a diocesan priest. If you're a Benedictine, you're going to live in that community. If you're going to be a Jesuit, you're going to have to do a lot of education. Franciscan, you're going to be all over the place in different charisms that your diocesan priesthood is sort of a hodgepodge of that. The only thing is it's usually going to be in a geographical location and doing parish life or possibly parish life and teaching and so forth. In our archdiocese, you sort of know it's going to be primarily parish life, and good chance that you will be sometimes in not really rustic, remote areas or anything, but sometimes rural areas and things of that nature. But
and what year were you ordained, and how many were in your ordination, I guess, class? Yes, sir.
So I was ordained June 24th on the feast of the birth of John the Baptist. And that year, class of 1995 for the Archdiocese of Mobile, actually had 6 of us.
Yes, sir.
Strangely, we were 3 different ordinations. So 2 were ordained in May, myself and Monsignor Key, who's presently our judicial vicar. He and I were ordained on June 24th, and then 2 others were ordained in September.
Yes, sir.
And also there were 6 of us in that class.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you have any particular mentors throughout your days in seminary that are particularly at the forefront of your thoughts, someone who really helped shape the priest that you became?
Yeah, I think my priesthood there would be Father Patrick Marr, who I converted under. I always wanted, strangely, when I was in seminary and even about the model of priest, I always thought of Father Marr. But after I got ordained and everything, and probably knew it before then, you sort of realize, okay, I'm not going to be like Father Marr. He was a very pious, direct guy himself, but very holy. I mean, the man literally did pray 2 and 3 hours a day. And then he ended up being my first assignment. In other words, after I was ordained and I came home from seminary, my first assignment was at St. Bede's, and he was the pastor. So I had 1 year as him. And I remember him sitting me down saying, okay, you're here at St. Bede's, and this is what I want you to do, which I've always thought, oh, okay, this is sort of what diocesan priesthood is. He says, say your mass that you're assigned. I want you to go over to the school, say 1 or 2 of the classes a week, go to the hospital once a week when it's your day to go, and just show up at some activities and events, and before you know it, you'll have plenty of work. And then his other thing, he was sort of a math guy, I guess. So he said, there's 24 hours in the day, 6, 6, and 6. And I said, 18 hours. And he goes, okay, yeah. He goes, 6 hours of you got to do 6 hours of work. Try to, wouldn't it be wonderful if you could get 6 hours in for prayer, and then 6 hours of preparing things for the homilies and things like that. So he was always, doing these, very practical things. So he had a big impact on me, even though I would say my priesthood, I'm not like him, but he definitely inspired me. And then a spiritual director in Rome, who was actually an Italian priest, retired priest, who was my spiritual director also too. Just his and he was totally different. He was much more of an academic guy, but also just down to earth. What I would call sort of that Italian way of, life as well. So he was very inspiring. And so there have been different priests, that you find that you admire. But Father Marr, Father Minogio was this other priest's name. And then just some other priests. Or we have some. He's now deceased too. There was a cranky priest that I was assigned to. It was in Montgomery, Monsignor Dagnan, who's been long dead. He died about in 96 or 97. Cranky, and we jokingly said, is a good priest, just not a good human being. But he was a good priest in the sense he knew his priestly identity, and he could be cranky and everything, but you knew deep down, and I think people knew deep down he cared. And he had his flaws and he had his crosses. But he had worked on death row here in the state of Alabama, and was a good historian, another Irish guy, good history guy, just loved to read. And so you could have fascinating conversations with him. And then, he would gripe a lot, but he would still just keep trying. So, so those models, imperfect and some perfect and some that you just realize, oh, I can't meet that, but learn from it.
More of just a simple practical question. Well, actually, before we move on to that, let's talk about Rome for a minute, Monsignor, if that's okay. Tell us when, how long, and really why were you in Rome? What did you do when you were over there? Yes, sir.
So I went, after I did when I graduated college in 1988, entered seminary in 89, that spring of 89. And so I was at St. Ben's or St. Joseph's Seminary for pre-theology, because I had graduated college. So if you don't go right out of high school into seminary, so I needed a couple of more hours. Most guys do of philosophy, and some of it is just to get you used to seminary as well. So I was a liberal arts major to begin with. So that 2 years, I got another degree in philosophy at St. Joseph. And then so at the beginning of that second year, Archbishop Lipscomb, matter of fact, told myself and two other guys that we would be going to Rome to the Pontifical North American College, which is the national seminary for seminarians from the United States. And it's set up on the European model. So you live at the North American College, and some of your spiritual formation and pastoral formation takes place there, but then your theological education takes place in the universities in the city. And it's usually a seminarian that goes to the North American College. They can choose it, or sometimes their bishop chooses it. Archbishop Lipscomb chose it for us, and it was going to be the Gregorian University. So there's three primary theologates, one run by the Dominicans, which is the Angelicum, the Gregorian, which is the Jesuit, and there's also Opus Dei, which is the Santa Croce. Now, that one is a more recent thing. When I was in seminary, it was really between the two of those other two. So I was sent there for my theology formation. And then in the Roman system at the time, you would finish your required academic work in 3 years, and then your fourth year, because you have to still have 4 years of formation, you begin your licentiate program. That is, you can start working on a program that fourth year, which would be a specialization in some form of theology, and then an additional year you would get your license. So Archbishop Lipscomb always had it, for the most part, unless a guy just wanted to return home after the 4 years, you would stay an additional year. So I finished my, bachelor's in theology. Then I worked in what they call a license I did mine in fundamental theology, the credibility of the faith, and so forth. And so I came home that summer, was ordained, and went back to Rome for one more year as a priest, finished that degree and wrote my thesis, came home and was assigned. So I was there. And then in 2011, I went back on faculty to the North American College from 2011 through 2015 as the vice rector for administration. At that time, it was set up, you have a rector. Matter of fact, the rector that I was rector the whole time I was the vice rector is now being made you're from New Orleans, the new Archbishop of New Orleans.
Really? Okay.
James Checchio, and you're from he was the chaplain of the Philly Eagles. Yeah, for many years. And so now, but he was, so it's usually, I was vice rector, and the way that was set up was I worked with the Italian workers and did some of the business aspects of the seminary, but I also taught some classes like with homiletics, how to hear confessions. And you had, I didn't do spiritual direction with seminarians, but I did some of their formation sessions. In other words, I had 10 guys that I would meet with throughout just to make sure where they were, where was everything lining up and towards their formation and moving forward. So
this might be total sidetracked here, but my mind has just been on Rome, Italy. What's it like living, what do they call it, the Eternal City? Like, what's it like living where you're surrounded by history and faith?
Well, that was one reason Archbishop Lipscomb told me that I was being sent, because I was a history major. And Archbishop Lipscomb actually was a PhD in church history. Actually, he wrote some of the most comprehensive history on the early church here in Alabama and the Deep South. But he had himself gone to Rome, and he told me, he goes, "Oh, you're a history major, you're going to enjoy it." And for me, I just tell everyone I did. There were, again, days that you wish you were back in the States. Mm-hmm. There were days you wish St. Peter maybe had gone to Germany instead of Rome or something. But because it can be chaotic and things, but I totally enjoyed it. Like to walk, because we usually walk to class from the North American College to the Gregorian was about 1.5 miles, 2 miles, probably a 2-mile walk. And, but in that 2-mile walk, you could see modern Rome, ancient Rome, medieval Rome, Renaissance Rome in building and architecture as you walk. And I would always love that in the sense of find different passage and side streets to take to go to the Gregorian. And then again, at the seminary, the Gregorian and most of the schools here in Rome, it's an international makeup. So it's based on a very European model. You go into, like your first year, you were on the 3rd floor. The aula held about 250 people. The profs would come in, the bells would ring, you stayed there. There would be in between classes, there would be like a 15-minute break in typical Italian fashion. You go get a quick espresso or some soft drink or whatever. Bells ring, get back to the class. And classes were from 8 in the morning till right at 12 noon. Okay. Then you got out, and there was not usually afternoon classes except for maybe one that you just wanted to take, a specialization or something. But then in the afternoon, there was the typical thing at the North American College. Lunch, or the pranzo, was the biggest meal. So that would be the formal sit-down meal where you would have the the pasta, a meat dish with a vegetable, salad, a little dessert, and then at night was usually more like leftovers type stuff. But it was, I had totally enjoyed my whole experience there. Even if a lot of guys, like our classes at the Gregorian, were in Italian. So did you know Italian fully by the time you began class? No, but Americans, we had a very elaborate note system. We helped each other. You learned Italian, or even some guys didn't maybe learn fully Italian, but for me, one of the funniest things, I sort of wanted to really try to acclimate into it. So I remember my first year in my spiritual director, Father Minoja, said, you obviously look like an American, or English. At that time, I had more hair, and so I was sort of pasty white and red hair. And he said, so people are automatically going to try to speak to you in English because they figure you probably. But so he challenged me ever so often just to get on a city bus, go out into what they call the peripheria, or the outskirts, not the outskirts, but like the suburbs of Rome, where the general population lived. And he said, go into a coffee bar and just listen to people and try to speak and mess up and embarrass yourself. So I did that.
It's good advice. Yes, sir.
Did you get pretty good at it?
Overall, I don't think I ever, Italian tutors or foreign language will tell you if you dream in that language, you've learned it. I think I had one dream partially in Italian, but I can still go back there. Matter of fact, when I go back there, you get into it and
Absolutely.
I can manage and get around. And then when I went back on faculty, I took a few more classes, primarily because I was going to have to deal with the workers and things. And so learning different vocabulary and things. But I'd love to go back to Rome even now. I mean, I would say it's sort of like a second home. I mean, I don't feel like have to plan. If I go there, I can just go there and do it.
What are your top 3 Catholic must-sees in Rome? What would you say, Monsignor?
Obviously,
not including the Vatican.
Well, the Vatican, museums and all, but the first and foremost is, St. Peter's. And then again, that was one thing you always realize, a lot of people, even Catholics, don't know, why did they build it where it's built? It's the burial place of Peter. So St. Peter's. Then for me, I would say Mary Major, the other basilica, actually where Francis was buried, Pope Francis. But that is, I just think, a magnificent church, and the devotion to Mary. It's the first major church built in her honor in Rome. So that, and then I think just to get back in touch with things is you want to go to one of the catacombs and see, okay, this is where the early Christians were buried, and like we are now in the month of November, just seeing that connection to the early church, and particularly the early church in Rome, and then how it, the church, basically acclimates some of the structures of the Roman Empire which has helped it into this very day. So definitely St. Peter's, St. Mary Major, and then I would think to go to the Church of the Jesu, where St. Ignatius is buried, and also the hand of St. Francis Xavier, the hand where the rest of him is in India. But I mean, that hand that baptized, over 20,000 people. So it's quite busy.
I've been to Rome one time, and it was a quick 2.5 days, a long Europe trip with my best friend from childhood. We, of course, did the Vatican and St. Peter's and everything. It was fantastic. But I really wish, I did not know that St. Ignatius was buried in Rome, actually. So my goal, certainly, when we get back, is to go and see him. When we went on our Acts retreat, Monsignor, which for everybody listening, Monsignor was actually a retreatant on the Acts retreat that Ryan and I went on. He is one of the original 12. Not apostles. We're not all that good.
He's one of our homeboys.
Absolutely. But when I introduced myself, I mentioned, going to Jesuit high school in New Orleans. And I said, which I say often to people, I know people have a lot of opinions on the Jesuits, but the men who educated me at Jesuit were very good and holy men, and they were certainly not teaching any heresy.
Right.
And you and I sat at the same table together in our small groups, and I sat down, and you very quickly just turned and mentioned to me, I've never forgotten it, but you said, Alex, I really appreciate what you said, with my time in Rome and the Jesuits, I agree. And, I appreciate the compliment, just you kind of validating that. But if you don't mind elaborating on your time with the Jesuits and what you kind of meant by that.
Well, I think they are very well, and there are different types of
there
Jesuits,
are, of course,
things and all that.
Yes, sir.
But the Jesuits that I ran and had teach at the Gregorian were very dedicated, number one, Christian men and priests and Jesuit priests, and very much, in a lot of ways, were inspiring just how they were sacrificing for being there. And a lot of people say, what do you mean they were, teaching in Rome and all? But if you look at Auburn University and you go to the general office of any professor at the campus and all, most of them might be a small office, but they have their own office. A lot of those Jesuits are at the Gregorian at the time. You did not have your own office. Your office was in your room above the building, at the top of the building, or in another building somewhere in the city. But most of them, I remember going to one of them's office, which was his room. And his room was, remember this, a window, a sink, a single bed, and his bathroom was down the hallway. And this is a guy who holds 2 PhDs and, but very animated to teach the faith and to try to do it right. And so I was just always, very inspired. I mean, we all had the Jesuit jokes,
Oh, yes, sir, of course.
in other words, we'd always joke that you would have to knock on their door to tell them it was Christmas Day because they wouldn't, figure out, because they were always doing research and things of that nature.
Yes, sir.
So,
Yes, sir. Well, I appreciate it, Monsignor, of course.
If there was one, okay, so I want to kind of transition to your journey back to the States. So if you could, summarize just the most important thing you brought from your time in Rome, both the first trip and the second time when you went back on faculty. What did you bring back to the States with you from your time in Rome that made you ready for your time in Mobile?
I think for as my priesthood and everything in Rome is that you learn not to take yourself too seriously, but also to be disciplined. Because I do think, like, to particularly being in seminary in Rome and formation was you had to be self-motivated, but at the same time learn to make mistakes and be able to laugh at it to a point or to embarrass yourself. And so I think when I came back home, there was that, and there was sort of a, being from the deep South myself, growing up in a small town, we can think that way versus, okay, there's a bigger world out there and a bigger church, but yeah, this local church has something to add. So I would say my whole time in Rome also helped me be actually proud to be from Alabama, and strangely, and I've always taken that as probably with my history background too. I'm a very adamant to be proud of where you're from regardless. And so I think that helped get back into parish life. I was very happy to get back in parish life when I got out of seminary. And even after that 1 year as a priest back in Rome, I was very happy to get back and just get into ministry. But I think also, again, some of that self-motivation that you had to, I think, sometimes have to have in Rome, the formation helped me just with parish life. And so I think that was one of the strong points of that formation there. And then again, that first 2 years being back home was spent as an associate there at St. Bede's. And then immediately almost at the end of that second year, Archbishop Lipscomb visited St. Bede's for our confirmation and said I was being transferred down to Mobile and that I was going to be the vice chancellor. And I was just like, why? But again, that's where obedience comes into play. And he said, oh, well, your history background and all that. So that was a big change because I went from parish ministry. And so the one thing that he did agree, I was supposed to be right at the cathedral and work in the diocesan offices right off the bat. I said, well, can I live in another parish and try to help out? And then, so I did that. So I was transferred down to Mobile to be the vice chancellor. working Monday through Fridays in the Chancery office. But then I lived at St. Pius X, which was a Midtown Parish in Mobile, and where I could say daily mass. And then on the weekends, because I was sort of the free priest, a lot of times I would go and substitute at different parishes and things on the weekends, particularly around the Mobile, Baldwin County area, but sometimes on the weekends throughout the diocese. So that whole experience right off the bat, I think, I didn't get as long. Matter of fact, when I came to Auburn and celebrated, strangely, the first Easter here in Auburn happened in 2020. So we're in the middle of COVID, but it was real fun because that first Christmas and everything, I mean, I had served or presided over Christmas Mass or whatever, but for the big Mass, always, wherever I had been, I was always the MC, and the bishop was the primary, he was the celebrant. So my first time of actually being the celebrant for the Easter Vigil actually occurred here.
Oh, wow.
And at that point, that was already almost 20 years of 25 years of priesthood. And so I remember Father at the time, that Easter, that was closed circuit TV, or we video or taped. I mean, it was during COVID, so no one was there. But then that second Easter, Father Jones was here as pastor, and I remember Father Plessela mentioning. He said, I never thought about that, but yeah, you would have not been. In other words, I knew how to do it all because I'd been the MC or whatever, but it was a lot of that. So I've always enjoyed, and my experience also was in Mobile, being when I was made the rector of the cathedral, also being at that time the chancellor, then became the vicar general. So being at the cathedral, we always had a 12:10 mass and always heard confessions before that. So that really was my pastoral thing of, okay, just really get into those things that you can do in the midst of your other assignment, which was primarily, I always say, bureaucratic work, and it was bureaucratic work, but just to take that with zeal and try to help people as much as you could and things, even in those offices. So
I could be totally wrong, but my personality, I'm just thinking of all the bureaucratic stuff that goes on top of all the spiritual stuff. I love that you're able to stay connected in parish life as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just sounds like it would be so over the top. Did you crave the simplicity of parish life, or you kind of hit it in stride? How was that?
You always sort of wanted it, and then of course I was in the Chancery basically from I was ordained in 1995, went into it in 1998, and was there until 2011 when I went back to Rome. And then when I came back, I went back to it from 2015 to 2019. But in those, 2003, had been like the whole sexual abuse stuff. So I was right in the middle of that. And those probably were some of the aggravating, I would say dark, but you would still, and I remember during all that knowing, okay, I haven't done any of this. There was some bad priest and some bad decisions, and you were trying to handle that. So you're trying to handle that with credibility and being honest, and at the same time being disappointed in things. But I remember that Easter saying, I'm going to have resurrection here. In other words, I mean, I think that a lot of that compelled you to be even a better priest than you could be, and that you can. And I think that I think for the priests that have been ordained the past 10 years and all, they discern their vocation a lot of times in the middle of all that. And So I think priesthood is stronger because of making sure you're real with yourself and you're dealing with your own demons. And then sometimes that means, making sure that we don't betray your vow, your promises, and you don't betray the people that you're serving. So you owe it to yourself to be the best you can, health wise, both psychologically, spiritually, physically, even. But I was very happy to get here, and like I said, I have been happy the whole time overall. I mean, you have your days and stuff, but it's a dynamic parish to begin with, and good people and things. But you see what, okay, I saw here when I got here, I have a vision. It was, okay, sacramental life. It was always a good parish, but it was sort of like, okay, we need to go deeper spiritually. And particularly after the COVID stuff, I think even more so, when we couldn't go to Mass. And then we rebounded very well here, but tragically, a lot of people never came back. And I think that's due to, yes, the health threat, but I think also to, if you were not grounded in it, you didn't miss it that much. And I critique the church too. I think we were too quick to give excuses not to come back sooner. And I think sometimes, to make sure our catechesis, that everyone knows why we go to Mass and why we need the Mass and we need to be there live and stuff. So that's one thing, at least here, is just, okay, I remember very much at that time, Father Plassel would have been here, and I was just like, okay, we got to get this Mass thing, like, there was these different schedules and all, and I sat down with everybody to say, okay, let's do daily Mass. And then because we had lots of people going to confession, and that's where we made the decision, okay, we're going to do the daily Mass, 8, 6, hear confessions Monday through Friday. I mean, so we're hearing confessions 6 days out of 7, and Mass is offered and adoration. And some of that is like with younger families and everything else, to get them alive in their faith as well, and trying to see what they need. And so listening to people, I mean, like, what's needed in younger families versus what do the older people need. And again, go back to Father Mar, he would always say, take care of the sick, take care of the elderly, take care of the kids. And then he said, most everyone else can take care of themselves until they really need you. And which there's probably a truth to that.
Certainly.
You need to help young families where they're at. Go see your homebound parishioners. You're sick, or, when they're going through it. And then when people have special issues and things. But I do really believe, like, for parish life is just really getting people to see the real thing is staying close to the Lord and the sacraments, and developing people's prayer life is even more important. Matter of fact, that's one of the things I think we have to go back to almost the early church. We're living at a time now where we can't take anything for granted anymore. And I think it's a good time for the church, because we can't take for granted everyone's going to be there, and you can't force people, and you can't scare people, and you can't guilt people into it. You have to just tell them, this is what the church teaches. This is what Christ wants for us. And then let's help each other grow deeper in our faith. And I mean, for me, my faith has grown deeper by the people that I minister to. And a lot of times they minister to me without knowing it. So.
Well, Ryan and I both have had our journeys away and journeys back, and you've heard a little bit about that, of course, over time. I certainly agree with, especially after COVID, Monsignor, that especially I think young people too were and still are very much looking for, one, the truth, and also a a place that can provide them with the structure and the sanctuary and everything that goes along with that to give them that.
Right.
Really what did it for me personally, and I'm not going to go on about this, but it's becoming a father, becoming a parent. When you realize you're going to be a parent, you think to yourself, well, who am I? What do I believe? And what do I want to teach my child, my children? And Lucy and I got back to Mass, and it wasn't some, magic moment where the flame appeared over my head, but listening to you and Father Plessala and getting back to confession and receiving the Eucharist, and it just was so obvious. Like the first time you went to Mass, it was, oh, this is the truth, and I'm home, And once you find that and you realize that, everything really does fall into place. And what St. Michael's does so well, and what, thank you and everyone who's been here with you and the Holy Spirit, of course, but like you said, just living the sacramental life and offering the sacraments, and just a chance for us to go and live that life every day of the week. Like you said, it's indispensable, really. Yes, sir.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's just to tell a young family, just if you can take out time, just come, bring your baby, go in the Saturday morning and just sit in the church with each other, and you don't have to say anything. Mm-hmm. Just making, and that's one of the beauties, like with our young families, watching them show that their kids, that this is their space too. So that the child, I do think, gets used to, just like your own house. Okay, they're familiar with this place.
Very much so.
So, I mean, that's, I think one of the best things we could teach is just, okay, this is, where you're at.
That's one of my favorite Monsignor Savage farmer moments, is when you call out people like, don't you dare give a dirty look to a baby who's making noise, because those parents are doing what I always get like this shot of pride that's just like, thank you, Monsignor. Not that anybody in our congregation gives us those looks. Most of the time, as you guys are doing great, we get a lot of very supportive families around us who do pour love into you.
Right.
But you do have that thought in the back of your head. And that's one of my favorite things, is Monsignor up there saying like, that's exactly where that child needs to be.
Yeah.
So we appreciate it. Alex was saying how, it wasn't this light bulb moment and then things like that you and Lucy went through. I think about my time before I kind of fell away from the church. I did go K through 12 Catholic school. We were taught everything we should have been taught, but I don't think we were taught with the fervor that we should have been about the actual meaning, the true presence, and how important that was. I think about how many times growing up in my teenage years that I received communion without a second thought of what I was actually doing. Right. And then I couldn't even tell you what the source is, but there was a study of Catholics who actually believe in the true presence.
So the CARA reports, I think that's the Center for, I forget the acronym, but the CARA reports typically are the ones that look at all that. And it doesn't surprise me in one sense, because I do think there was, and this is a critique of the church in any time, is that there was some watered down, quote, teaching, lower standards. And that's the thing, again, going back to excellence, is like, even with our youth program. So, you've got a high school kid in your CYO here at St. Michael's. Well, they're doing, pre-calculus. They're doing, preparing. Some of them are doing college courses in high school. So why wouldn't we expect them to know certain things about their faith? In other words, I was telling, I think, one time, one of the associates, I forget, it was Father Plessel or Father Jones, I said, confirmation, we should make them, not make them, but make them. Like, okay, 11th grader, not that you're necessarily going to be a priest or anything, and this would be both for guys and girls. I want you to take one of the Sunday Gospels, and I want you to give a homily on it. I mean, you think about in the Jewish faith, for the bar mitzvah, they have to memorize Hebrew, and they're actually younger than 11th grade. They're usually about 8? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, why wouldn't we expect that our kids can know the 12 apostles, the precepts of the faith, and be able to give a rational explanation on just basic tenets of the faith? And I think if they're challenged to do that, I think our young people like a challenge, actually. And I mean, our young people in our youth program, when you go over there, I'm amazed. They can figure out if you're, pardon me, BSing them or something. So you just need to be who you are. I mean, I can't be 16-year-old acting for them, but if they know I love and care about them and then just try to tell them the truth, that's what you're trying to do. So
Here's a fun question. If Jesus walked into St. Michael's Parish this Sunday, what would you hope he'd notice first?
I would hope he would notice that people are trying to sincerely follow him, and hopefully they would recognize him.
Amen, Father.
No, I mean, like, we're in the time of the year right now, in the month of November, we're dealing with All Saints. We're praying for the souls of the faithful departed. We're getting ready for a liturgical year to end. And as we get near the end of the month and get near the Feast of Christ the King to go into Advent, I mean, I do really think he is going to return again. And sometimes I think we just sort of sometimes really need to be motivated, not scared about that, but if we're just doing what we're supposed to be doing, I think if he comes again, we'll be ready. Why would we be fearful of him coming again? Yes, sir.
We've got a few other, topics we're going to dive into, Monsignor, but a random quick question. We asked Father Plessla this question, and we have asked Father Cadbury this question as well. I think this was a good transition to it, but in the current world today, what do you think is a man's greatest enemy and a woman's greatest enemy toward living a Christ-centered life, essentially? What do you think offers the most, tension there or challenge, however you'd like to think about that?
I think the greatest challenge in one sense would be just confusion sometimes over roles and the loss of intrinsic dignity of the human person in general.
Yes, sir.
In other words, just to be very blunt about the gift of what it means to be a woman,
Yes, sir.
a female, a lady, whatever, and then what it means to be a man, and then sort of the responsibilities, and that certain roles, it's just like in the church, certain roles can only be done by a priest. And that's what I at least try to do in my priesthood, is not try to take over your role, and vice versa. And I think that's just sort of the greatest enemy, I think, out there, is when you allow that to become confused and it makes people think something else, then it can be quite devastating.
Yes, sir.
And,
Yes, sir.
And then just, again, just the loss of true, what it means to be a human being and intrinsic human dignity, I think, is the greatest threat both to a man and a woman. And just and then the common things is just the overemphasis on superficial things, that we put the burdens on both men and women. I really do. I mean, and you see it with the college students, and you see it with the high school students. And you, being a teacher, this, the whole body image thing, the whole you got to be this, and you have to be this, this, and this, and then in the end, you don't know what you're supposed to be doing. And so I think it's just being rooted in to know thyself but to know thyself in the image and likeness of God,
Sure.
and not to feel that you're less of a person for that,
Yes, sir.
And
Thank you.
yeah,
Thank you. There certainly is plenty of confusion out there today.
yeah,
Yes, sir. And plenty of yes, devastation because of that. Absolutely. We feel like we have this beautiful little bubble a lot of the times, and in a way we do beautifully,
Yeah.
yes, sir. But being an NP, and I talk to people every day about their health, of course, but a lot of things going on in their lives too. And there's no shortage of dysfunction and suffering, and
right.
it's beautiful being able to enter into that a little bit with people. Sometimes you really wish you could go home with them and just help them out, Yes, sir. Certainly, I pray for my patients every single day.
Yeah.
That's the least I could do, but it's you wish you could do more. I'm sure you feel like that sometimes
yeah,
too. Certainly,
definitely.
yes, sir. Absolutely. What is your favorite way to pray? I know you have to do, of course, your hours and everything,
Yeah,
but do you have any other favorite devotions or places you like to sit and pray, times you like to pray, anything like that at all? Adoration hour, anything like that?
My prayer time is best in the mornings for me, or sometimes like a strangely mid. Well, number one, I think I have to pray based on where you're at and everything. So your schedule, but like here for me, it's going to be more in the morning. So like when I get up to, I always do the morning offering, and that's just part of trying to make sure God's on my lips before anything else. And I usually do that sometimes even before getting out of bed, then get out of bed and do some of what I would call my rote prayers, where and that's not usually the liturgy of the hours, actually. It's just some devotional prayers that I will do, and then some spiritual reading. And then for me too, just thinking about the day and asking the Lord for grace and help there. So, and then we're lucky, like in our rectory, to have the Blessed Sacrament there. But then I also like to do either at St. Michael's itself, to go into the church, pretty much like I said, sometimes in the mid-afternoon, and just sit there and either do a rosary or finish up some of the liturgy of the hours and just be there in the church. And I like to do that on Sundays too. If I have the 5:00 Sunday night mass, I like to go in there and do my evening prayer in the church. And some of that is, I think it's good for people to see us pray in the church too.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Absolutely.
That it's, because again, that space, and I enjoy our church space, actually, and I find myself moving around. I'm just when it's empty and just sitting there, or sometimes watching people come in before mass and spontaneous prayer of, sometimes as a priest and pastor, what's going on in their life, and oh gosh, they're dealing with cancer, they just lost a spouse or something, and you're just that being cut off to give them a prayer and offer a prayer. And then sometimes in mid-afternoon now, might fall asleep, but I sort of think the nod and the neck jerk's a good thing too,
Yes, sir.
just to relax with the Lord.
For the everyday Catholic who's just busy, maybe you have a family like Alex and I, a young family or older kids, whatever, what would one non-negotiable spiritual habit be that you'd recommend for someone who just thinks they're maybe a little too busy to really dive into?
I think you definitely have to, regardless of who you are, you have to figure out where that prayer time is going to be, and at least to give it, I mean, really and truly 15 minutes where you can just commune with the Lord. And I think that does not have to be, again, any sort of, it's just sitting with the Lord, if anything. And that non-negotiable of, when am I going to do that? And then I think in family life, particularly spouses, to give room for that, Or, and then I think too, I'm a big advocate really, learning that sometime in the day too, particularly with younger families, that you're going to have some form of prayer with one another as well. And I think, again, naturally that might come at bedtime or it might come right off in the morning. But sometime in that day, I know I'm big about, like with baptisms, when we do the parents and godparents make the sign of the cross. Hey, as a mom and dad, you put the kid to bed, and a simple prayer and a blessing, particularly with fathers giving a blessing to the family, but a mom and dad can bless the children too, and so, and maybe just letting that be a simple time of prayer,
I love it. Monsignor, I'm going to ask this selfishly for me, but I'm hoping somebody that listens to our show will have the same struggle. I'm an all pro at talking at God when I pray, but I do struggle with just opening up, quieting my mind, and listening. What practical advice might you have for someone like me who needs to shut up sometimes and hear the voice of God?
I think it's just to sit down and not be tempted to say too much even then. I'm one that will say, okay, I'm here. No, just sit down. And some of it, I would like when I was in seminary, sometimes you'd laugh about this, but once again, we live in a stressful world, obviously. So sometimes it is just sit down, take a deep breath, a couple of breaths, and just be still. And it can be aggravating, but I do think that's sometimes when he says the most profound things to us. Because I do think we go to the other extremes. We just out-talk God, and we never actually are listening. And I was told that a lot of times in spiritual direction. You just need to shut up, because basically you've been telling God everything, but you've not been listening to God. So we have to develop some sort of mental prayer, just where we're actually just sitting there with him.
Would you be willing to share with us a time, any time, but maybe something recently where you really felt like you heard God's voice very clearly? Anything come to mind at all?
Probably, I would think, and probably like even over this past weekend, sometimes where you just really felt, okay, I can do this. Or no, there was a conviction that a peace that comes over you about a certain decision or something you need to do. And it's sort of like, no, you can do this. And then the quick prayer is, don't let me back away from it, because there's always that temptation. And sometimes, okay, it's time to do it now. So some of my prayer of more recent months has been that, like, okay, Michael, what are you going to do today that you need to do today, and not put it off again, or not have a 3-day plan for it. You just need to do it. Yeah. So I keep a little not notebook, but one of those little pads, and I'll put 3 or 4 things that I need to do. And I actually spiritualize them. Sometimes there's just, okay, I just need to do this. I need to, and it's usually revolving around the job, but sometimes too, I think you just cripple ourselves by inaction too. Mm-hmm. So it's like, okay, you got to act on this. So.
About 3 weeks ago, Monsignor, Ryan knows this story, and I'll keep it very brief, but our third has gone through a tough few weeks of sleep. He seems to have gotten out of it now, which praise God for that. But I normally go to Forsati either Wednesday or Thursday morning for adoration. I go from 5 to 6 instead of the gym, and I really cherish that time. And during that stretch, I had slacked on that. I had prioritized getting up and going and exercising because I felt like, oh, well, I need to do that, for my body and my health. Of course, letting that fatigue, and you know what it's like to be that tired, just kind of cripple you. And one morning, the alarm went off, and I was supposed to go to adoration. And you know how when you sit on the side of the bed and kind of have that mental battle within your head of what are you going to do? And I thought to myself very vividly, I'm like, gosh, I'm so tired. Just feel like I'm kind of suffering, and very pitifully. And I said, okay, it's Wednesday. It's all right. They'll have it tomorrow. I'm going to go tomorrow. And in the act of swinging my legs back up into my bed, I mean, no thoughts in my head whatsoever. I'm mid-swing, as clear as day. I heard it in my heart, however you want to say it. I know you know what I mean. Our Lord said to me, Alex, why won't you suffer for me? And I took that as, okay, yes, you'll get up and be extra tired and go to work and go to the gym or go for a run, but spending that time with me, and it was kind of haunting me all day that day, yes, sir. Because of course I swung my legs and I heard it and it startled me, but I went to sleep, and it really weighed very, very heavily that day. And the next day, of course, I went and have not, missed my day since then. And the next day I was even more tired because he woke up 3 times, but I made sure I got there, of course. And I said, okay, Lord, I am here to suffer for you 100%. But I thanked him so much for putting that on my heart. It really was so beautiful. So that kind of transitions into something Ryan and I talk about quite a bit on this podcast, offering it up, offering things up. What is your take? And maybe I should ask, what does the church really teach about offering up the suffering during sickness or sadness, or offering up even prayer time, sleeplessness, exercise? Like, do you feel like, or do you believe, does the church teach that God really does use those things for the good of all?
Definitely, because number one, we're asked to participate into the life of Jesus Christ, and so that's good times, bad, and his own suffering. So I think that definitely uniting our own suffering with his suffering has a redemptive quality, or it can mean something for us or for someone else by doing it. So I'm all for that. And in the sense of, matter of fact, if we continually avoid that, then something is wrong with us, that we're not willing to be inconvenient by anyone or even God himself, and so like that whole thing, like on the side of the bed, no, get up, you actually need this. And that's a good sign to read that there was nothing wrong with that. Like, okay, I'm just going to do that. I'm going to be, and I think as Christian people, we have to be open to that. We have to be willing to suffer. I mean, we don't go looking for it all the time. It'll come enough, and it'll come enough too that we'll try to avoid it. So it's like sometimes we just really need to do that. I mean, again, saints do that, but again, a father or mother just, yes, sir. I think about you young families, like I'm not sure. See, I'm very grateful I'm not. I'd like to have to get up to like, 2 in the morning, I would have to do this. Yes, and but you do it because you're the father or the mother, obviously, and that's another human being that's been brought into this world that needs.
Yes, sir. Yep, it's an honor.
Monsignor, we could, I'm going to go out and just be bold and say this is Monsignor Farmer 1.0. We're going to have you back. You're going to have to be on our show periodically. So get over it. Okay. But we could talk all night, as we tend to do when we get together, and we're actually going to have dinner on Saturday. So we'll do more of this. I do want to end, before I throw a bunch of rapid fire nonsense questions at you, I do want to end with, what do you think is the biggest source of hope in our church as it stands today?
The biggest source of hope for our church today, I would think, is our young people, young families, and young people. They're not necessarily a lot. What am I trying to say? A massive number. I think Pope Benedict said one time, sometimes we think we need to get everybody a big old school bus. Sometimes it might just be a car of 5 that makes a more lasting impact. So I would think what I see is we've got they're not the majority out there in the world, but there's a convicted group of what I would say people, and again, I would say even some older people that have been renewed in their faith and all, that I think will preserve the church through the trials that we're going through now and in the future possibly. But that the church is in good shape, that it'll, I mean, the Middle Ages was that way. The church could survive for the Renaissance. And it's not just surviving, but it will be life-giving. That's why I think we have to learn to be there, like families of mutual belief, to stick together, because you need that community. There's a book, what's his name, on the Benedict option, that you, within the greater community, there has to be these smaller enclaves of convicted Catholics that stick together. They're in the various workplaces, but they get together with each other to feed off each other in a very good way. And so I think there's a realization that I think y'all too have and your families have, and that you're seeing a lot of our college students are having, that we're going to have a community of believers to get through this life together. So I think that's good for the church.
Thank you, Monsignor. That was a great answer. You ready to throw some rapid fire questions at him?
I looked at yours and we've got different ones like all the way through. So we'll just boom, we're rapid fire.
All right, Monsignor, quick round here. If you weren't a priest, what would you be?
A history school teacher.
Fantastic. Who is your favorite saint or one you have the biggest devotion to?
My biggest devotion is St. Catherine of Siena and St. Francis Xavier.
Yes, sir.
And then in recent year, this holy year, has been Matthew Talbot. He's venerable.
Yes,
Matt
sir.
Talbot.
Okay. Do some reading there, yes, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've got some research to do on that last name. I didn't know that one.
Okay.
Who's your favorite pope?
Favorite pope would be Benedict XVI.
All right.
Sir. What will your last meal be, including dessert as well? What will your last meal be, including dessert? Yes, sir.
Would be carbonara pasta with creme brulee.
Fantastic.
Coffee or cappuccino, Father?
Coffee.
Okay, not that you didn't jump on the espresso
I
chain.
like espresso, but not cappuccino.
Okay, coffee or espresso?
Espresso.
All right, I like that answer.
Favorite book?
Favorite book is Brideshead Revisited.
Okay, I've heard. I've not read that. Okay.
Favorite meal to cook? Y'all don't know this, but Monsignor's quite the chef.
I don't know about this.
I've heard.
I like to cook pasta norcina, and I like to do some fish dishes as well.
Favorite movie?
Favorite movie would be actually Darkest Hour, about Winston Churchill in the early war years.
Yes, sir.
And then Life is Beautiful is an Italian movie.
Okay.
About actually about family life.
Oh, yes, sir.
He's an Italian comedian, but it takes place in World War II.
Yes, sir. Okay.
Okay.
Most underrated Catholic tradition?
Underrated Catholic tradition is praying the rosary.
Amen. My wife and I prayed the rosary every day in October for the month, and the graces were obvious too, especially in our patience and parenting. I mean, truly, Monsignor. So we're going to keep that going. What is your favorite travel destination within the United States?
I do like going to New York City.
All right. Nothing wrong with that. Yes, sir.
I grew up so close to it that we did go in a few times. I did not take advantage of St. Patrick's Cathedral as much as I should have, but Tess and I were actually just talking about that. Even though New York has changed quite a bit over the years, how that would be a really fun trip to go and see the cathedral and things like that. All right. Favorite sport?
I like actually baseball.
Okay. Who's your team?
It was at one time San Diego Padres, and then of course the Braves. And
I got you. Savannah Bananas now.
probably I've heard a lot about that.
Oh, goodness. What is your favorite parish to visit in our archdiocese that is not ours?
Probably trying to think. St. Bede's. I was an associate there, but I think it's just a down to earth place.
Absolutely. If you don't mind me asking too, Father, I want Ryan to guess, because I have a guess. The question is, which is your favorite sacrament to confer that is not the Eucharist? Any of the others? My guess is going to be baptism, simply because I've noticed that every time a baby is going to be baptized during or after Mass, you always mention it every time in some way. So that's my guess.
Like baptism and then confessions. I enjoy.
Confessions, okay.
A lot of times people don't think I do, but I actually enjoy. Confessions are very powerful because it's lifting a heaviness off somebody and is putting the Lord's grace there too. So,
yes, sir. What else?
I was gonna guess baptism, actually.
Okay,
so that would have been
confession.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Monsignor, I know it's late, and I know your schedule looks way busier than mine and Alex's. So we really genuinely thank you for coming out here and spending the time with these two fools in the garage for the first time. It'll happen again. We're even going to peer pressure Father Gabe to be out here with us one night.
Yes, he and I were talking about that.
There you go. You keep the pressure on him for us, and we'll get him out here soon. But this was really, really enjoyable, and stakes are on me on Saturday. Alex is bringing the wine, and we'll try not to disappoint you at dinner. At least you'll have our wives for some better conversation.
That'd be great.
For anybody watching, y'all go ahead, give us a follow, give us a shout, share us on social media, on Instagram, anything like that. Go ahead, go to our website, buy us a t-shirt. I'm going to buy Monsignor one so he can wear it around. He's usually...
What's your t-shirt look like?
It looks just like that.
Okay.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. It's not bad, right? We'll get Father Gabe one too. Father Gabe's got to show up to the garage first, but yeah. Any last words, Alex, before we let these people get out of here?
Just thank you all always for joining us. Please pray for us, and we will be praying for you. And please pray for Monsignor Farmer and his vocation, and for vocations around the world.
Monsignor, any last words?
Well, it's late at night, so may the Lord be with you and grant us a restful night and a peaceful death. Amen.
Amen.
Father,
Amen.
Son, Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you, Father. We love this. We love you.
Yes, sir. Love you, sir.
Monsignor gets to throw the paper at the camera.
Absolutely.
Oh, so
It's
just
a tradition. You got to hit the camera.
Try to hit the camera. You see you get closer.
the top of it.
Yep.
That was pretty good, actually.
He's so much better than you.
He lightning bolted that thing. That was perfect.
Oh, gosh.
Oh,
I can't one up Monsignor. Go. Too
just
long.
you overshot.
Too
It's
long.
all right. You bullseyed it one time. I've done what Monsignor done once or twice. It wasn't my house. I grew up in